"You're done here, Lena. Pack your things." The words dropped like a hammer, silencing the entire floor. Lena stood frozen by the glass wall of the conference room, still clutching the folder she had prepared all night. Richard Hale, CEO of Hale Properties, didn't blink. His tone was cold, precise, rehearsed. "I trusted you with company funds, and now I find irregularities in the client accounts?" He tossed a stack of printed spreadsheets across the table. "There's no coming back from this." A hush fell over the room. A few junior associates exchanged awkward glances. Someone pretended to be checking their phone. No one spoke. "I didn't touch any accounts without approval," Lena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "If there's been a mistake, we can clear it up." Richard leaned forward. His silver cufflinks caught the sunlight streaming through the window. "Oh, I'm sure it's just a mistake, sir, but sadly investors don't tolerate mistakes." He smirked. "Your email access has already been revoked. HR will walk you out." Lena's breath caught. She had been with the company 7 years. She'd worked through weekends, picked up last-minute travel, covered for others during crises. She was the last to leave the office and the first to show up. And now, in front of everyone, she was being discarded like trash. "Effective immediately," Richard said, standing up. "And since you're living in corporate housing—" "I have a 7-year-old, Lena interrupted. "We need time to move." "You have 24 hours, Richard replied flatly. "Security will monitor the move out." He straightened his blazer, signaling the end of the conversation. A tall security guard entered the room, hesitating briefly at the doorway. He looked at Lena with what might have been pity. Then, remembering his orders, he stepped forward. "I'll walk you to your desk," he said quietly. Lena nodded slowly. She gathered her notes, her ID badge, and the framed photo of her son from the desk. As she passed the reception, co-workers glanced up, then quickly looked away. She walked past the company logo on the wall, Hale Properties, the letters gleaming, sharp-edged, unforgiving. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright. She blinked up at the sky, the weight of disbelief settling like stone in her stomach. As she crossed the lobby, the concierge who once greeted her daily avoided her eyes. The building's revolving doors clicked behind her with a cold finality. She stopped just beyond the entrance, a single suitcase by her side. Her phone buzzed with a message from her landlord. "Per company request, your lease ends tomorrow." She stared at the screen, then up at the building, once her second home, now just cold glass and steel. A black sedan waited by the curb. But before she stepped inside, she turned and walked the other way. She needed to say goodbye. To the shame, to the silence, to the fear, but not to her son. She headed home. The apartment was nearly empty. Boxes were stacked by the door, hastily labeled in red marker, kitchen, clothes, books. Lena moved like a ghost between them, folding the last few items with robotic precision. The walls felt colder without the framed drawings her son used to tape everywhere. A small voice broke the silence. "Mom?" She turned. In the doorway stood Aiden, 7 years old, holding a worn-out stuffed dinosaur. His backpack sagged on one shoulder, and his eyes were wide, uncertain. "Why are we packing again?" he asked. "Are we going on a trip?" Lena knelt down, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "No, baby," she said gently. We're just moving somewhere new." Aiden's brow furrowed. "But did we do something wrong?" Lena froze. "What do you mean?" "At school," he whispered, "Mrs. Harper said you don't work at the big office anymore. And someone said you stole money. Is that true?" Lena's throat tightened. She reached for his hand, held it tight. "No, Aiden, I didn't steal anything." He looked down at his shoes. "Then why do people think you did?" "Because the world doesn't always care about the truth. Because some people lie louder than others. Because justice takes time." She didn't say any of that. Instead, she pulled him into her arms. "Sometimes," she said softly, "good people get blamed for things they didn't do. But it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they have to keep going. Until the truth catches up." Aiden hugged her back, small arms squeezing hard. "Are we going to be okay?" Lena kissed the top of his head. "We're going to be more than okay." There was a knock at the door. The building manager, clipboard in hand. "Miss Tran, we'll need the keys by tomorrow noon." Lena stood, her expression unreadable. "Understood." She watched the door close behind him, then turned back to her son. "You hungry? Can we have cereal for dinner?" "Cereal it is." As they sat on the floor eating from mismatched bowls, Aiden suddenly smiled. "You're still my hero, Mommy." Lena blinked back the sting in her eyes. Outside, night had fallen. The city buzzed beyond the glass. But inside that tiny apartment, a silent promise was forming. not just to clear her name, but to build something that could never be taken away again. And as she tucked Aiden into his blanket nest on the couch, she stared out at the skyline. Somewhere out there, justice was waiting, and she was done waiting for it to arrive. She would go and get it herself. Morning came too fast. The boxes were sealed, the clothes packed, and Hammerschrindern. Aiden was still asleep on the couch, curled around his dinosaur like nothing had changed. Lena stood by the door, holding a single duffel bag. She looked around the apartment one last time. The cracks in the ceiling, the chipped corner of the kitchen table, the faint crayon marks on the hallway wall. Every inch of this place had a memory. She opened the door slowly. A uniformed man stood waiting in the hallway. Marcus, or the building's night guard. He was kind, quiet, never said much. But this morning he looked uneasy. "You really gotta leave?" he asked, not unkindly. Lena nodded. "Policy's policy, right?" Marcus scratched the back of his neck. "I don't get it. You were always the first one in, last one out. Everyone knows that." Lena gave a faint smile. "Not everyone." He hesitated. "Where will you go?" She slung the strap of the bag over her shoulder. "I'm not sure yet," she said. "But I'm not disappearing. I'm just stepping back." For a minute, then she paused, turned to look him in the eyes. "I'm not coming back to explain myself, Marcus. I'm coming back to own the building." Marcus blinked. "Wait, what?" But she was already walking down the hallway, steps calm, heels clicking softly against the tile. Downstairs, the same black car waited. The driver opened the door. Lena got in, closed it behind her without a word. Through the tinted glass, the apartment shrank behind her. A chapter closed. The engine hummed to life. As the car pulled away, Lena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. Her anodicovers, and her mother, non-timber just two smiles in a diner booth with plastic seats and paper cups. She ran her thumb across the edge of the photo, and for the first time in days, she exhaled. The city passed by in a blur, and her mind drifted to where it all truly began. 1990. The photo was faded, the edges curled from time and touch. Lena was 6. Her mother, Lena Tran, sat beside her in a diner booth, arms wrapped protectively around her, a tired smile stretched across her face. Behind that smile lived the weight of 2 jobs, endless laundry loads, and nights with no sleep. They had ordered 1 grilled cheese and split it. Lena remembered thinking it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. Her father had left months earlier. One night he came home drunk and never came back. No goodbye. Just silence and overdue bills. Her mother never cried in front of her. But sometimes at night, Lena would hear muffled sobs through the thin walls of their 1-bedroom apartment. By the time she was 8, Lena had memorized the sound of coins. Every dollar counted. They walked everywhere, took buses that creaked. When her shoes fell apart, her mother stitched them with dental floss. One winter, their heater broke for 3 days. They bundled under blankets and made a game of it. Camping, her mom called it. But Lena knew better. Her mother worked at a local laundromat by day and cleaned offices at night. Still, every evening, she'd help Lena with her spelling homework. Eyes bloodshot, hands cracked from bleach and detergent. And always, she'd say, "We don't steal, we don't lie, and we don't beg. We stand tall, even when the world makes us crawl." It became a mantra. By 14, Lena was bagging groceries after school. By 16, she was flipping burgers on weekends and filing mail for a small law office during summers. She didn't party. She didn't complain. Because every time she thought of giving up, she remembered her mother's hands. Bruised, calloused, still warm when they held her cheek and whispered, "You're not meant for these walls, baby. You're meant to lead." But dreams didn't come easy. On her 17th birthday, Lena came home to find her mother collapsed in the hallway. Pneumonia, they said. Complications from overwork. By the time Lena reached the hospital, her mother was already gone. Lena sat in the hospital corridor, a cracked vending machine humming beside her. She had no savings, no backup, no family nearby, just 1 duffel bag and the memory of her mother's voice. She didn't cry. She just stood up and walked toward the world, alone, but never small. For most people, college was a chapter of late-night parties and football games. For Lena, it was work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., hours classes from 4 to 9, then janitorial shifts until midnight. She slept 3 hours a night, sometimes less. She studied on the bus. $8 noodles in break rooms lit by flickering bulbs. Her textbooks were secondhand, pages underlined by someone else's struggle. She didn't complain. She just moved forward. At 22, she found out she was pregnant. The father, a co-worker, disappeared the moment she told him. People, people whispered. Some suggested other options. But Lena looked at the ultrasound, saw the flicker of life, and chose differently. She kept the baby. She named him Aiden. And from that day, every decision had a new gravity. She worked harder, slept less, cried only in the shower so Aiden wouldn't hear. Some nights she rocked him to sleep with one arm while typing out business reports with the other. Every cent went to diapers, rent, formula. Birthdays were handmade cards and homemade cake. But Aiden never lacked what mattered most. Love, the raison, stability, integrity. By the time she was 28, Lena had a degree in business administration and a reputation for reliability. She got hired as an executive assistant at a mid-sized real estate firm. She showed up early, stayed late, never missed a deadline. When Hale Properties merged with her firm, she stayed on, transferred, promoted, and quietly became the right hand to Richard Hale himself. She handled his calendar, smoothed out investor meetings, covered for his short temper and long vacations. She was the engine behind the scenes, efficient, calm, invisible, but not unimportant. Co-workers came to her for advice. Vendors trusted her word over the VPs. She never stole, never schemed, never played politics. She believed in the work. She believed loyalty would protect her. She didn't know. Betrayal often comes from above, not behind. The conference room buzzed with quiet tension. Employees from every department were packed into rows of sleek chairs. The overhead lights hummed. At the front of the room, a white projector screen displayed the Hale Properties logo in bold, imposing blue. Richard Hale adjusted his tie, stepped to the podium, and flashed a politician's smile. "Thank you all for being here on short notice," he began. "As you've probably heard, recent events have shaken this company's trust in some of its internal systems." He tapped a remote. A slide appeared. "Internal breach, lessons learned. Transparency," he continued. "Integrity, discipline. These are not optional. They are the backbone of this firm." People nodded, some dutifully, others warily. Richard paused for dramatic effect. "Last week, a long-trusted staff member violated that backbone. He didn't name her. He didn't have to. Everyone knew who he meant. Falsified expense reports, unapproved transfers, damage to investor confidence." He shook his head solemnly. "We have zero tolerance for betrayal. And though this was painful, it was necessary. We acted swiftly." The screen changed again. "Courageous leadership in difficult times." Richard's voice softened. "Falsely, we owe it to our clients, to our partners, and to each other." Scattered applause followed. Some forced, "Miruwaina was." Others hesitant. In the back of the room, the HR director glanced at her phone. Her brow furrowed. "Sir," she whispered to her colleague, "there's someone at the front desk asking for Richard. Says she has an appointment." "Who is it?" She didn't give a name. Meanwhile, at the podium, Richard basked in his moment. "This, my friends, is how a company cleanses itself." The room was silent. Then, the door creaked open. Slowly, deliberately, heads turned. Heels echoed against the marble just outside. And there, framed by the glass doors, stood Lena. Hair pinned neatly. Simple black dress. No makeup. Just presence. She didn't rush. Didn't flinch. She just walked. One step after another. Toward the fire that had tried to consume her. Not to burn, but to claim what was already hers. The doors swung open fully now. Lena entered. Not alone. Behind her, two sharply dressed individuals followed. One in a navy suit, the other in gray. Both carried sleek briefcases. Their faces calm. Professional? Unfamiliar. The Richard insurance. Gasps rippled through the room like wind through tall grass. Richard blinked. "What the hell is this?" No one answered. Lena didn't speak at first. She simply walked down the aisle between rows of stunned employees, her eyes fixed on the podium. She stopped halfway, turned to the front row. "I'd like to request an internal dispute resolution," she said clearly. "Per corporate governance protocol, section 9B. Silence. The man in the navy suit stepped forward. "We represent a majority stakeholder," he said. "We ask that this proceeding be paused until legal clarification is provided." Richard laughed. Short. Uneasy. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "Who exactly do you represent?" The man smiled politely. "That will be clarified shortly." The room stirred. Richard looked to the head of security. "Can we escort these people out?" The security chief hesitated, then checked something on his earpiece. "Sir," he said quietly, "we were just told to stand down." Orders from the board liaison. Richard's face twitched. Lena finally looked at him. Not with anger, not with fear, but with something far more unnerving, composure. She turned to the HR director. Would you be so kind as to book the executive conference room? We'll need about 20 minutes. The HR director nodded slowly, still unsure if she was dreaming. Right away. Lena gave her a slight smile, then turned back toward Richard, her voice calm. I know this isn't how you pictured your morning, Richard. She paused. But it's exactly how I pictured mine. The room no longer felt like a conference. It felt like a courtroom, or a bomb about to go off. Whispers darted between chairs. Phones buzzed with texts no one dared send. Someone in marketing slowly closed their laptop, unsure if they were supposed to still be taking notes. Richard straightened his posture at the podium. He tried to smile again. The same curated smirk. But it didn't land this time. All right, he said, voice tight. I think this little interruption has gone on long enough. He looked toward the man in the navy suit. You said you represent a stakeholder. Well, I've been in this business a long time, and I don't answer to ghosts. The man didn't flinch. We'll be happy to clarify everything, mister. Haley, in private or... No, Richard interrupted. Let's do it right here. Let everyone hear. He gestured to the room with exaggerated calm. This is the most transparent company in the country. Isn't that what we say? No one responded. Behind him, a second door opened. The executive conference room, glass walls, long table, silent as a tomb, was ready. Lena took a step toward it. She paused by the projector screen, still showing courageous leadership. Her eyes flicked up, then back down. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Richard noticed. What is this? He snapped. Some kind of stunt? You think dragging in lawyers makes you important? Lena didn't answer. She simply looked around the room. One by one, eyes met hers. Some nervous, some confused. A few, just a few, quietly hopeful. The security chief stepped aside. Ma'am, he said, holding the door. She walked through. The others followed. Richard stood alone at the front of the room. He tried to laugh again, but no one joined him. Not this time. As the glass doors closed behind her, the silence outside grew heavy. But inside that room, the balance of power was about to change. The executive conference room was quiet. Sunlight spilled across the polished table, glinting off brushed steel and glass. Lena took her seat at the far end. The navy-suited man sat to her right, the woman in gray to her left. Richard remained standing. I'll ask one more time, he said, voice shaking now. What exactly is this about? The man in the navy suit opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, slid it across the table toward Richard. These, he said, are the updated records from Nova Capital Group, parent company of Hale Properties and related subsidiaries. Richard didn't move. The man continued, measured and calm. As of 2 weeks ago, following the passing of Mr. Daniel Tran, his controlling stake in Nova Capital, 51%, was transferred to his named beneficiary. A pause. The legal successor is Miss Lena Tran. Time stopped. The words hovered, unreal. Richard stared at the folder like it might catch fire. That's not possible, he muttered. The woman in gray added gently, it's been verified through every legal channel. CC filings were submitted last week. You may request to view the documentation. No, Richard said, voice rising. This is some kind of fraud. A setup. Lena spoke. Just once. Clear. It's not a setup, Richard. She leaned forward. It's accountability. Across the glass wall, a handful of staff had gathered, peering through the blinds. Faces pale. Curious, one whispered. Richard's breath came faster now. You don't have the authority to... I do, Lena interrupted. Legally, financially, operationally. She stood slowly. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to take responsibility. She looked him in the eye. And I start with you. Richard's face went pale, then red, then pale again. He snatched the folder off the table, flipping through the documents like they might rewrite themselves. Names. Numbers. Legal stamps. His hands trembled as he reached the last page. I never authorized this, he barked. She forged this. She had help. No, said the woman in gray. We traced the transaction logs. You used Lena Tran's credentials to authorize transfers from the contingency fund to an offshore account in Barbados. Richard froze. We've already opened an internal audit, she continued. Nova Capital's board has been notified. The FBI has been briefed. He looked at Lena. You set me up. Lena didn't blink. No, Richard, you set yourself up. I just turned the lights on. He stumbled back a step. Sweat glistened at his temple. This is slander, he spat. I built this company. I built all of you. A beat, Turnotone. Then the man in navy said, that's enough, Mr. Hali. Derawan of Harndo. Outside the glass, more employees had gathered. Phones discreetly recording. Eyes locked on the scene inside. Richard turned, looked at them. But there was no sympathy, only silence, only truth. And in that silence, he felt it. The weight of every lie, every belittlement, every decision made with arrogance. The room, once his kingdom, now looked unfamiliar. And he? Small, powerless, irrelevant. From behind the glass, the office workers watched in stunned silence. A moment ago, they had sat through a lecture about betrayal. Now they were witnessing the truth stand taller than lies. Someone in HR slowly set down her notepad, eyes locked on Lena. A junior analyst near the window looked at his manager, then back at Lena. The shift wasn't loud. It was quiet, like air slowly returning to a room after a storm. Then a voice came. From the back, Miss Tran. It was Marcus, the night guard. He stood just outside the doorway, his cap in hand, eyes soft but clear. I'm sorry for what happened. I should have said something sooner. Lena met his gaze, held it for a second. Then she gave a small nod. Not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, but recognition. One by one, others looked away from Richard and toward her. They weren't clapping. That's in the hero. They didn't need to. Respect doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands still and listens. And in that stillness, Lena didn't need to speak. Her presence spoke for her. Then as the room exhaled, Lena turned to the board, voice steady once more. It was time to clean house. Lena stood at the head of the table, no longer just present, now in command. She turned to the room, then looked directly at Richard. Effective immediately, she said. Richard Hale is relieved of all duties. His access is revoked, and his severance is frozen, pending a full internal investigation. No theatrics, no shouting, just precision. The man in the navy suit handed a sealed folder to the compliance officer. Detailed records, he said. Start with the February transfers. Richard looked around, as if searching for someone to defend him. No one moved. Even his longtime assistant wouldn't meet his eye. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then said quieter than before, You won't get away with this. Lena raised an eyebrow. Get away with what? Following the law? Two members of security entered the room. One approached Richard. Sir, we'll need your badge. Richard's fingers curled around the lanyard at his neck. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he unclipped it, placed it on the table, and walked out. No applause followed, just the sound of quiet resolution settling over the room. The next morning, Hale Properties felt like a different building. Not louder, not busier, just cleaner. In a way no mop or policy ever could achieve. The hallways that once echoed with nervous laughter and whispered judgment now carried something else. Stillness, thoughtfulness. People moved slower, spoke softer. Not out of fear, but reflection. In the security office, Marcus sat with a cup of black coffee, staring at the promotion letter in his hands. He hadn't slept much. The memory of that day, Lena walking past him, suitcase in hand, eyes full of betrayal, still haunted him. He had wanted to say something, anything, but fear had tied his tongue. And yet here she was, rewarding him not for what he had done, but perhaps for what he didn't, for not mocking her, for not kicking her while she was down. That kind of mercy, it was heavier than punishment. Elsewhere in the break room, Danielle from accounting sat in stunned silence. She'd once flagged an inconsistency, a number too large, a transfer too sudden. Richard had brushed it off. Her manager had warned her to pick her battles, and she'd gone quiet ever since. Now she held a new ID badge. Senior Associate. Today. No meeting, no announcement. Just the title, the race, in a note, for seeing what others didn't. On the lower level, Mrs. Alvarez entered the supply closet to find her name replaced on the janitor's schedule. No more night shifts. No more 2A. Perminamont. Commutes on dangerous streets. She didn't ask why, but she wiped her eyes when no one was looking. Lena moved through the building quietly that day. She didn't call anyone out. She didn't keep score. But she remembered every act of grace, every small kindness, every person who had looked at her like a human being when everyone else saw a liability. And those who hadn't? She didn't punish them. She didn't humiliate them. She simply removed their shadows from her circle. Some found themselves reassigned. Others left on their own, unable to breathe in the air they'd once poisoned. That, too, was justice. Not loud, not vengeful, but fair. Later that afternoon, Lena stood once more in the same boardroom where she had been humiliated just days before. But this time, she wasn't standing alone. The chairs were filled not with executives, but with people who made the company breathe. Analysts, receptionists, security, cleaning staff. No one had been required to attend, but the room was full. Lena didn't stand behind the podium. She stood beside it. "I know what some of you are thinking," she began, "that I came back to punish, to prove a point, to settle scores." She paused, met their eyes. "But I didn't come back for vengeance." She held up a photo, her mother smiling despite cracked hands and tired eyes. "I came to rebuild, for people like her, and for people like you." Silence, then a shifting of breath. "I was raised to believe we don't steal, we don't lie, and we don't beg. We stand tall, even when the world makes us crawl." She placed the photo down. This company crawled. Now it's time for it to stand. She didn't list policies, didn't offer name names. Is did the surrixo, just values, integrity, fairness, dignity. And then she bowed her head, not out of weakness, but in tribute. To those who held on when they had every reason to let go. To those who still believed in better. The light outside began to fade. A different kind of day was beginning, and so was something else. She stepped back from the podium, papers in hand, a plan in motion. Change wouldn't come in a speech. It would come in the days that followed, and they were coming fast. By the end of the month, Hale Properties didn't just have a new CEO, it had a new soul. Lena didn't start with firings or restructures. She started with a bulletin board, placed in the main lobby, titled Truth in Motion. Every week it displayed open budgets, project timelines, and a breakdown of executive bonuses, down to the last cent. Anyone could ask questions. Every answer had a name attached. People stopped whispering. They started asking. Next came the initiative no one expected. The Tran Foundation, named after her mother, was launched to provide full college scholarships to single mothers working full-time. No essays, no politics, just proof of perseverance. Applications flooded in. Lena created a new hiring policy. All leadership roles required peer evaluations. No more corner office promotions made behind closed doors. Merit had to be witnessed, not just claimed. She cut executive bonuses by 20% and raised entry-level wages by 15%. When asked why at a press conference, she simply said, "People don't quit jobs. They quit cultures. We're building one worth staying for." The board tried to push back on some changes. But pushback doesn't work when you hold 51%. Employees noticed, vendors noticed, clients noticed. The energy shifted, not overnight, but undeniably. The glass office that once looked down on people now let the light in. And people began walking taller through its halls. 1 year later, the lobby of Hale Properties looked much the same. Glass walls, polished marble, the slow hum of elevators sliding past one another. But if you stood just past the reception desk, near the place where Lena once stood in silence, suitcase at her feet, you'd see something new, a brass plaque mounted on the wall. Clean, Guacherno. Reverent, et seri and a warsawarna sonomarnum. It read, "We don't steal. We don't lie. We don't beg. We stand tall, even when the world makes us crawl." Ekon un. Transion. Every morning, employees passed it on their way in. Some stopped to read. Some didn't need to. The words were already etched into how the company moved, how decisions were made, how voices were heard. It wasn't a slogan. It was a reminder once stubborn, divermi. That truth doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Near the plaque, a new hire lingered. A young woman in her 20s, hair tied in a messy bun, holding a visitor's badge and a notebook full of ambition. She stared at the quote for a long time, then pulled out her phone, snapped a photo, and whispered, "Aterm, Sursturman, damn. That's real." It crossed the lobby. Lena watched from a distance. Unannounced, unnoticed. She smiled, not for recognition, but because she knew what it meant to start at the bottom and finally see the ground rise to meet you. The courtyard behind the office tower was quiet this time of day. Birdsong mingled with the distant hum of traffic. Sunlight filtered through trees planted in perfect rows, casting soft shadows over the stone benches and walking paths. Lena sat on a bench near the fountain, a paper cup of tea in her hand, legs crossed, hair loose in the wind. Across the grass, Aiden ran. Taller now, braver, his laughter ringing like wind chimes. He stopped near a flower bed, picked up a dandelion, and turned to her. "Make a wish, Mom." Lena smiled. "I already did." She closed her eyes for a moment, not to wish, but to remember. The long nights, the eviction, the silence that followed her out those revolving doors. And now here, a new day, a new rhythm, a space where her son could run freely, not away from pain, but toward joy. She watched him twirl, arms wide, like the whole world was his. And for the first time in a long time, it was. From a distance, the building stood tall, not just with glass and steel, but with a promise that even the smallest voice could change everything. And that promise was now yours to carry. Have you ever been pushed out of a place you gave your all to? Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do and watched the people you trusted turn away? Have you ever stayed silent? Not because you were wrong, but because no one would listen. If you have, you're not alone, and you're not powerless. True power doesn't come from titles or corner offices. It comes from quiet resilience, from choosing to stand tall, even when the world tries to make you crawl. Because the truth, it always finds its way back, and when it does, it walks through the front door. If you believe good people deserve better, if you've ever waited for justice that never came, make your voice count. Comment justice? Below. Tiyun. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to, like Erie, subscribe, and join us here at Unveiled Wealth, and where every story uncovers not just pain, but power. Because sometimes, a story isn't just a story. It's a reminder, that the fight for dignity is never lost. It just waits for the right moment to rise again.